And we're live streaming, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. The joint HR and ad hoc budget committee meeting is now called to order. Can we just take a moment of silence? Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
There was an agenda sent out, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir. I've got it.
Okay. Can we post it? Share it?
Yes, sir. I'm doing it right now.
Okay.
And can everyone see the screen?
Yes. Before we get to old business, and I turn it over to the mayor, do I hear a motion to approve the HR committee's September 8th minutes?
For approval.
I'll second.
Moved and properly seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to you as we move forward, okay?
That'll be fine. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. And I'm so glad that we're able to have this joint meeting of Human Resources and the Budget Advisory Committee as we're approaching the hour of presenting a budget to council. And it's clear that the primary concern, I think for all of us, has been that of employee compensation, given what has happened in the market, the labor market, and us being competitive as an employer. And so I look forward to the presentation today. But first, a bit of old business, an update on staffing, recruitment, and retention. Kay, are you going to take this one?
Hi, Mayor. Hello, council members. We do have an update on our recruitment and retention slides. We've been showing you, some of you, I guess from the budget ad hoc committee, have never seen these, but the HR committee members, you should be familiar with them. They are reports and slides that Ryan Landry put together for us sometime last year that we've been showing on a regular basis. Unfortunately, I think as most of you know, Ryan is no longer with us. He left to go to work for the federal government, but before he left, he worked with Becca Jenkins, our HR analyst, who has been working with his report. She's familiar with them, and she's going to take the lead on this part of the presentation. So Becca, would you please?
Welcome, Becca. It says she's connecting to audio.
Oh, there we go.
Hey,
Oh, there she
sorry
is.
about that. We're having some slight technical difficulties. So I'm in Heather's office using her screen. All right. Are we sharing?
Not yet.
You may have to stop the share on the agenda. There you go.
Should have the ability to.
Or do we just want to share?
There should be a share screen button at the very bottom.
There you go.
Okay. So to start with, we are looking at actual staffing levels. So for this in white, you can see for non-sworn, we have 281 vacant FTEs, which is full-time equivalents. So, and this is full-time equivalents for positions, not necessarily openings. So that's just one thing to note. For example, our recreation, we have a lot of part-time positions. So 2 part-times would equal one of these full-time equivalencies. And so as we're looking at solid lines, those are going to be our actuals. And then the dotted line is looking at budgeted positions. So for non-sworn, we've gone up 5. And then looking at police in blue, we have 38 vacancies. And this is a decrease in 5 from September's meeting. And then when we're looking at fire down at the bottom in red. And we can see they have 23 vacant openings as well, which is an increase of 4 since the September meeting. And then if we look at this on a relative basis, so not looking at the numbers, but looking at it as a percentage, you can see that up at the top, we have fire sitting at 94% in red, and then we have police in blue, still up there relatively similar at 92%, and then the white line you can see has kind of been trending down for the past couple of years, and that is non-sworn staffing level falling at 76%. So moving on into this slide, we're really looking at 3 specific measures, and that's job postings, views, and then our applications. So the number of jobs that we have posted, you can see, is in the blue line, and then the gray bars are showing how many people viewed those jobs. And then, although this is slightly harder to see, in the orange bars at the bottom is showing how many of those people actually applied to the jobs. And so in September, we had 313 job postings. We had about 53,000 views for those postings. And then we had a total of 633 applications. And then if we move from there on.
Hannah, can I interrupt you and ask you to go back a second to that prior screen?
Sure, this one?
All right, so since September, you've had 320 job postings,
313.
313, okay.
Mhm.
And then of the 313, how many did you fill?
So this is looking at running postings. So it's just saying if it was open within a certain time. So if it was opened in, let's say, the middle of August and was open until September 2nd, it's going to be included in this. But then what we're also including in this is, let's say a job was opened or was posted September 28th, and then it's posted for 2 weeks or as needed. So this isn't necessarily looking at what's opened and closed. It's just looking at all postings that have been opened within that 1 month period per se.
Okay, but my initial question is, of the 313 posting, did we fill any of those slots in that time frame of posting?
Councilmember Shade.
Councilmember,
I'm
if our data really matches up to that per se, we know the number of positions, I guess, based on the vacancy rates from August to September, but some of these positions could have been open longer than that period of time. And even if the position closed, then that person may not be on board yet.
How many people did we hire in September? I think you'd like to know.
Don't have that in front of us, but we could definitely get you that information.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think that as you are going through this, and I may be the lone wolf on this question, but if we've got postings, I'd like to know in whatever category you're doing this. So you comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges. I just want to make sure posting and then job fulfillment, how those compare.
And Councilmember Shade, it'll be easy to go back. And in fact, Mayor, I don't know if you remember, even have your last mayor's report handy, but as you know, we report the number of positions, number of positions we filled, as well as number of employees who've left. And I believe that my last mayor's report, it was a period of about, I think, 5 weeks I reported on the entire month of September and maybe the first week in October. And I want to think, and I'm sorry I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was close. I think we hired, it was maybe 57 employees. That was including, we had 14 firefighters, 8 police officers, and then it was 30 something non-sworn. So we do track that. It's just not tracked on this particular report. we're just trying to show on this report what type, how many applicants are we attracting from our postings? How much
Kay,
interest? Yes,
Kay, on
sir.
your last report, you had new hires for the month to date as of September 29th, 39, and separations were 23.
Okay.
So it looks like you had 23 separations and 39 new hires for the month ending September 29th, 2022.
Okay, I think I might have been thinking about maybe the report that we did before that one, but because I know that there was one that had 50 some people because it did include the fire class and the police, but yeah, we do track that, the separations as well as the, and we could actually do it year to date if you'd like to see it, Councilmember Shade.
That'd be good. Let's show everyone.
Okay.
All right. Are we good to move on to the next slide?
Yes.
So this is looking at conversion rate and then as well as average applications per posting. So as you can see, the orange line is really saying that we've had approximately in August around 3 applications per posting. And then in September, we did drop down to 2 applications per posting. And then because average applications is a function really of how many people are looking, we also look at conversion rate. And for that, we're looking at how many people that clicked on to apply after looking at the job. And so as you can kind of see in that box at the bottom, our conversion rate citywide has really held pretty stable around 1%, which really our target conversion rate percent should be around 10%. So there's definitely some room for growth there. But this is really a measure of job attractiveness. So it's saying for every 100 people that look at our job, we get 1 application. Now I'll move into turnover. So this is looking at total turnover through September of each year. So from 2014 to 2022. And so we're really comparing the period from January 1 through September 30th of each year. So for 2022, for fire, we're looking at around 7%, police right around 8%, and then these two for the past 2 years have deviated from historical trend, but both of these employee groups have really kind of regressed back to the mean or kind of returned to the average. Whereas for non-sworn, we have kind of seen an upward trend for the past couple of years. And for that, we're looking at about 20% for that turnover, which again is still kind of on that higher trajectory relative to police and fire. And then if we look at annual turnover, so what we've projected, we have 2 projections, this slide and the next slide. So this slide is looking at our historical trend, which is basically saying if the turnover for this year follows the turnover from 2014 through 2019, what would it look like? And that would be fire sitting at about 9.5%, police at about 10%, and then non-sworn at 26%. However, last year we had a deviation from average, which is why we have this second slide, which is looking at annual turnover based on what occurred last year. So if what happens last year happens this year, we'd be looking at fire sitting at 13%, and then police at about 11.5%, and then non-sworn would jump up to 32%. And that is all I have for our update. If no one has any questions, I can turn it over to Heather to talk about paid family leave.
Any questions for Becca about any of that? Peter? Councilmember Shane, I should say, sorry.
Yeah, Heather, would you just go back to that other slide, the previous, I was just reading it as you were talking. So when you look at these trends from 2014 up to COVID, is there anything that you could interpret from these rates pre-COVID?
Do you have something specific, I guess, that you're
No,
looking
it
for?
looks to me that the numbers fluctuate, obviously, but pre-2020, you had a non-sworn 20%, 20.1%. And then on 2020, it dropped to 16%. Then it went up to almost another 25.5%. Then skyrocketed 32%. So when you look at the numbers, and I guess pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID, are you seeing anything in here that's telling to y'all that can help us as we make, as policy decision makers, what we need to be looking at, are we concerned about?
Councilmember Shade, this is Kay. I think that, in my opinion, the fact that we missed a whole year of not getting a cost of living increase right when COVID hit, because we just didn't have the funding to do that. Police and fire were able to maintain a little bit better because they still continued getting their step increases, their auto increases, and their CEPs, but non-sworn got nothing for an entire year. And I think missing a whole year, it really dropped our wages. And then I think that some of our surrounding municipalities have reacted maybe a little faster as far as trying to get their pay up. We've seen some municipalities do some kind of dramatic things. Private sectors really jumped out there with huge sign-on bonuses. And because it's been like a struggle to try to get employees. I think there's less employees out there to hire. I think that everyone is experiencing that. I don't really understand it. The whole people just deciding they're not going to work anymore. I don't get it. I've never really had that as an option in my life, but I've read that that's what some people have made that decision to take themselves out of the workforce for various reasons. So we're dealing with less, I think, candidates to hire. So people are fighting for those who are. And I do think that some companies and municipalities have just gotten very aggressive, and it's just a very, very competitive market out there right now. That's my interpretation.
Well, and Kay, thank you for that. I think we're all looking for, I think we all have questions, and any answers and interpretations helps me look forward. So some of this is science and some of this is just intuition, I guess.
Yes, sir.
So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, Kay, you want to take us on to the family leave discussion?
Good afternoon. Just want to give you an overview of what we are proposing as far as paid family leave. We have been drafting a policy, and we based that largely on what the state of South Carolina has done, and they implemented their paid family leave in October 1st of this year. And so as far as the number of weeks, we are mirroring their plan. We're just doing it a little bit differently. We would be proposing to provide 4 weeks of paid maternity leave, 4 continuous weeks from following the birth of a child for an employee. And then also, in addition to that, 2 weeks of paid parental leave. And the employee who gives birth would be eligible for this, as well as the other parent. So that would be 2 weeks of paid continuous leave for bonding with a newborn, adopted child, or a child placed through foster care on the initial placement. The parental leave, we would leave more open as far as the timeframe it could be used. It would need to be used within the 12-month period immediately following the birth of the placement. The maternity leave, we would want that to be used immediately following the birth of the child. Eligible employees would be similar to the definition of those employees who are eligible for FMLA, although it wouldn't necessarily be tied to FMLA. If somebody had already exhausted their FMLA, they wouldn't necessarily be eliminated from having this available. So it would be people who have been employed for at least 12 months, employees who have worked at least 1,250 hours in the prior 12 months preceding the date of the leave, and then employees who are either full or part-time regular employees. And as far as cost go, these cost projections are based on 2019 data, and then that data was adjusted to adjust for any increases that were given to employees since that time. And this is based on people who used unpaid leave during that time. So people used their sick or their annual leave during FMLA for birth or adoption or placement of a child, that wouldn't be factored in here. But the 4 weeks of maternity leave, we would estimate to be a cost of $18,375. The paid parental 2 weeks would be $13,048 for a total of roughly $31,424. That just kind of as a footnote to that, that is a very low estimate, because had this leave been available, a paid leave, there are a lot of employees who I'm sure would have taken the leave that may not have otherwise done so. We also have New York Life, who administers our FMLA, and an additional cost there would be an additional 7 cents per employee per month. So roughly $1,500 annually for them to administer a new type of paid leave. And we would propose starting this in 2023. Any questions?
Mr. Mayor and Mr. Chairman, council members Waring and Appel had their hands up.
Oh, great. Councilmember Waring?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Pope, if it's a difficult pregnancy, are there any exceptions that would extend it? For example, I don't know, cesarean section versus normal delivery?
So this would just provide the initial 4 weeks of paid leave. They would also have available after that time to either use any accrued sick leave, and recovery from pregnancy would be during the period of time by which you're discussing, like generally 8 weeks for a cesarean section or 6 weeks for a regular delivery. That
Right.
additional time could also be time that they use the city paid short-term disability, or they could
Okay.
use their leave and be paid 100%, or the short-term disability and be paid 60% for that time.
Good point. Very good point. Listen, I was in church 2 weeks ago. This young lady, we recognize people at the end of the service for birthdays, anniversaries, and, special things. This little couple, this lady delivered on a Friday and was in church on Sunday. And, came in front of the church. Obviously, we recognized her and stuff. But I said, man, I believe in superwomen, but deliver on Friday and you in church on Sunday. Good gosh. Anyway, I would think she would have been home, kind of resting up. But I know if it were guys, we wouldn't have been able to make it out there. I know that.
Councilmember Parker?
And Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Appel was next, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Appel and then Parker.
This is one of the rare occasions when I actually was not raising my hand and don't have anything to add.
Oh, okay.
Enjoy it, everybody.
Councilmember Parker? Did we lose you? Oh, no, you're still on the screen.
I
There
was
you
talking
are.
to myself. I'm sorry. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you. I know I'm not part of either of these committees, but the Women's Commission, this has certainly been something, high on their priority list for a while now. So thank you all for putting it out there. Just wanted to, so I know you said it mirrors the state plan. Can you tell me what is the only difference, the 4 and the 2 weeks separating the two?
So under the state plan, they couched 6 weeks for the person giving birth.
Okay.
And it could be used at any point during the year. They didn't specify. And in discussing that internally, we felt like that if you're the other parent, then that gives a little bit more flexibility, I guess, than the person who didn't give birth. So we tried to tie the 4 weeks directly to the mother's recovery, to distinguish why those amounts are different. And then they're still eligible for the 2 additional weeks that could be taken at any point, because I know that we run into a lot of issues with employees in childcare. And I'm one of those people that that ran into the same issue, after my daughter was born. Sometimes being able to have that time at a later time, like maybe one parent takes some time off initially, then the other parent takes some time, and then the first parent takes some more time on the back end to extend that period and give a little bit more time for opening up of finding childcare options. We felt like that gave some flexibility there.
Okay, great. Thank you. I mean, because that's what to me, it's still 6 weeks.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And I thought that was easier for employees to understand the difference in those two also, instead of, well, why do you get 6?
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Councilmember Parker. Any other questions? This seems like an absolute no-brainer. Admittedly, the projected cost may be low. I suspect it is, but it's a benefit we'd like to provide. We've been wanting to for some time, and I don't know if we need to take a consensus vote on it or not, but at this point, I certainly plan to include it in the budget that would be going out to y'all, unless anybody has an objection.
I have one other question. Ms.
Yes.
Pope, suppose can we have the flexibility if the mom wanted all 6 weeks instead of suppose I understand one mom have 4, maybe the father wants to stay 2 weeks, but suppose between a family they decide one parent does 6 weeks. Can it have can that be built, type flexibility be built in?
It would be more costly, and at this point we were mirroring the state, and they have not gone, I guess, to give the additional time.
Okay, all right. Listen, I'm certainly ready to vote for this.
And Councilman Waring, this is Kay. I mean, I think this is kind of a first step. I could certainly see us making, some adjustments in future years,
Right.
especially as we kind of work through it and see how it's all going to flow.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
The first month goes by real fast. I'm a granddad, but I still remember it went by fast.
Don't want to formalize this, and let me entertain a motion to accept it.
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Second, Mayor.
All right, and any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
We're making a lot of people happy, Mr. Mayor.
Good. So next up is a discussion of cost of living and pay plan adjustments. Amy's going to lead us on this. I would just like to make a couple of comments before she starts. The first comment is to thank Amy and our budget and finance staff, but also our HR staff, Kay and Heather and everyone. They've been working diligently. I think y'all know on what we might be able to do. Everybody's been working on it. I guess the special note to budget finance, they were able to think outside of the box, as we discussed recently, and kind of take a new look at how we allocate some of our accommodations and hospitality funding so that more of it could go to the general fund. And I think the ballpark difference of where we are compared to 2 years ago when we were at this stage is that we're showing around $17 million of funding that we're able to dedicate to either employee compensation or to make up for regular services and funding to get them back to pre-COVID levels, because we haven't completely restored those, and some new needs that have been identified by the various departments, new fire stations, new things that we've garnered as we've grown now over 150,000 citizens in our city. So that's a good starting point. And I'll just say that our goal was to make every available penny to go towards employee compensation that we possibly could. And that's to address what I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the change in the market, labor market since COVID, and honestly, just to catch up a little bit for that. A couple of years ago, when, as Kay mentioned, we weren't able to do a cost of living increase, we had some catching up to do, and we were falling behind compared to some other jurisdictions, and we wanted to catch up on that. I mention all that, by the way, you'll see in the presentation that we're recommending that we use most every penny directly to employee compensation. So our next budget ad hoc meeting, however, we still got to go back and look at those areas where we're trying to get funding back to where it was pre-COVID and all those other new requests. So I got to share with my committee and council members that we want to fund some of those things, and we're going to have to look once again, in my opinion, at either LOST or some millage to make it all happen, assuming council is agreeable. But the primary goal was this compensation that Amy's going to share with you now. Amy?
Good afternoon, everyone. Heather, could you stop sharing those screens so I can throw my stuff up there, please? Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, Kay has her hand up too.
I'm sorry, Amy. I just wanted to answer Councilmember Shade's question before I didn't want to forget. Chelsea just ran some quick numbers for me. Year to date, we've hired 388 employees and we've had 337 separate from the city.
So the net gain is how much? Simple math.
Okay. I have a calculator. Let's see. 388 and 337. 51.
We've got a net gain of 51 employees this year. So we have slowed the trend, if not reversed it yet, but that's heading in the right direction. Amy?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We just have some cost of living and pay plan recommendations for 2023 that we wanted to go through with everyone. Just so you know, we looked at the Consumer Price Index on the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and as of September, it's 8.7%. So we took that into consideration when we were thinking about a COLA. So we would like to recommend a 9% cost of living adjustment for all city employees in 2023 to make up for this Consumer Price Index. That would go into effect the first full pay period in January of 2023.
How much, Amy?
Not a 9% COLA. And that would bring our minimum to $16.35, just so you know. We're at 15 right now. In addition to that, we also are recommending that we adjust all 3 pay plans, police, fire, and non-sworn. When we met, I guess it was back in May, and then several other meetings after that, we talked about the salary comparison that was done and how all 3 really kind of needed some type of adjustment. And when we talked about that, we were talking about the top 25% of pay, which included, and that was that $17 million cost to get us within the top 25%. But that included cities like Charlotte, Atlanta, Raleigh, and Norfolk. So we really just kind of wanted to focus on the state of South Carolina to make sure that we're the highest paying municipality in the state. So that's kind of where we started. So, and including that, we want to make our minimum wage competitive in the Charleston area for our local competition as well. So we looked at several different options. We landed on the one we'll recommend, as you'll see in a second. So increase the sworn pay plans by 3%. This is all in addition to that 9% COLA. And then the non-sworn pay plan by 4.33%. So the total increase with the COLA for each would be 12% for police, 12% for fire, and 13.33% for non-sworn. The reason why it's funky like that is because we were trying to get to at least a $17 minimum wage. If that makes sense. I'm sorry, my voice is going away for some reason. The least opportune moment. Anyway,
Amy, go back to that other screen. You go a little bit too
Sure.
fast.
Non-sworn is really playing catch up, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
you'll see too, as we go through, we're still, non-sworn is still, got a little bit to go
Okay.
comparatively to the other pay plans. So right now, our current pay plan, the way that it looks now, a new hire at a high school level education, that's what we based all of these comparisons on. Their estimated annual gross pay, if all regularly scheduled hours are worked in year one, for police is 47,000, 39,000 for almost 40 for fire. And just to let you know, that includes the 6 months as a recruit at a 40-hour work week. So which they're not really on the pay plan at that present time. So it brings it down, that average down just a little bit, but we wanted to make sure we started from the very beginning to the end. So I just want to explain that. Okay, I said that right? Okay. In year 5, their estimated annual gross pay would be 51.9 for police, 46.5 for fire. Same with the 40-hour recruit that I just talked about. And non-sworn is 31,200, and that's all at a $15 minimum wage.
That's what it is now, right, Amy?
That's where we are right now, current plan.
Right.
In our current rankings in South Carolina, that puts police at number 1, fire at number 2, and non-sworn at number 12. And that's, remember, this is just the average starting pay for all grades and ranks only.
All right.
And then we did this graph as well. The bar chart shows their annual salary. So non-sworn is in gray, fire's in orange, and blue is police. And then the line graph is their aggregate annual earnings over the 5 years. So it adds each of their earnings every year. Good.
Yes.
Okay. So our proposed plan for a new hire at a high school level education, estimated annual gross pay, as long as they work all their regularly scheduled hours. In year 1, police would be 52.6, fire would be 44.7. Again, remember that 6 months of the recruit. And then non-sworn at 35.3. That's a minimum wage of $17. And in year 5, it would be 58.2 for police, 52 for fire, and 35.3 for non-sworn, because we don't have I'll explain why that is later.
Amy,
Yes.
when it comes to the recruit, that difference or aberration somehow as it was explained to me anyway, when they come out, they go in training at one hourly wage, and somehow when they come out, they get paid less. Is that being fixed? Is that being fixed?
No, because our hourly wage is less because when they're in recruit school, they're at a 40-hour work week, and then their annual salary increases. It's just the hourly rate that does not, because the hours are calculated different once they become a firefighter.
So, council member, what some other jurisdictions do is they just require the recruits to work the same amount of hours as a recruit as they would once they get sworn in on the force, and that's another way to address it. It would provide some extra training. So anyway, it's just that differential that we've had in the city of Charleston. I don't think North Charleston does it that way. They go ahead and have the comparable hours worked, even though you're a recruit would when you become a firefighter.
So why are we doing it that way? I'm just curious. Hopefully we're going to take the action steps to implement this. And again, I'm not for the lost revenue piece, I'll tell you that now. I think you all know that, but I'm okay with the millage. that said, going through all of this, when we get on the other side of it, we still gonna have firemen complaining when they come out of training about being paid less after they get trained versus prior to being trained.
And Mr. Mayor, Heather has her hand up, and then Councilmember Shade.
I think Heather wants to respond to that question, and Councilmember Shade, I'll come to you. Heather?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So we initially paid the recruits at the same rate as the entry-level firefighter. And a number of years ago, the fire leadership requested that we make an adjustment there. They were having trouble getting people in at that rate, and particularly because they're only working a 40-hour week and they have not the built-in overtime that they do once they go on the 24-hour schedule. So that adjustment and that rate was at their request.
I guess my point, have we had discussion with leadership on this such that if this gets implemented, are we still gonna have signs in the right of way saying, support your firemen, basically pay us better?
I believe that Kay did have some discussion based on what Mayor Tecklenburg was mentioning about that North Charleston starts them at the same rate, but they do have them work extra hours. So I think we had shared that information with the fire department. Is that correct? Okay.
I have not had that discussion with the fire department. We certainly could. I just, I don't know that, I don't know they have the training staff that could accommodate that, but it would certainly be an option. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but the recruits would then work 56 hours a week as opposed to 40. So I just don't know that that's something that they would really want to do, but it's certainly worth discussing.
And I think that's a good point, Kay, that there is a cost there on the training staff because they're on a 40-hour a week as well. And so that would mean that they would have the 16 hours of overtime too. So there would be a cost in doing that in both cases.
So, Mr. Mayor, where's the fire chief on this? I mean,
Well, he's on
what does
the.
he recommend?
I'm happy to call on him. Chief Curry, you want to comment to this discussion?
Certainly, and thanks for the time on this. I know that Kay and I have talked about all the pay issues previously several weeks ago. I think back in August, and separately, the fire leadership has been working with some of our other fire chiefs in the state to try to figure out how they address the same issue that you're bringing up. So we've got some information flowing in. As soon as we get it, we'll get it over to Kay to see if we can tackle some of those issues that came up in the Public Safety Committee meeting where we discussed pay and retention, trying to go with more of an annual rate versus an hourly rate, which is one of the things that's generating this conversation right now. So we've got some information coming in. We'll bring it over to Kay.
But you think that's going to be solved before we vote on this budget?
I think
it'd be a big failure to vote on a budget, and this issue is still being bandied about in the community. We're thinking we're solving it and not solving it.
Right. I can get the information as quickly as I can. I was following up on it just the other day, but I think part of the issue, and this is a rehash of something we discussed several weeks ago, but part of the issue is that the annual compensation goes up, but the hourly rate goes down because of the number of hours worked. So, I think there's a bit of conflict in when you think about annual compensation versus hours. So if we clean that up, it switches the conversation a little bit. I mean, end of the day, when you come out of recruit class and you go to the operations division of the fire department, you get a pay increase. It comes with the fact that you're working many, many more hours per year. So I'll work with Kay to clean that up.
Okay, thank you. And the last thing, and I'm listening to everybody else on this one. I know there was an issue about possibly combining the fire marshal's office with your department. Is that factored in this budget?
In talking with the fire marshal about that, we didn't want to come up with a plan that wasn't ready to be developed. So that's on the table for the 2024 budget, but it's been discussed.
Thank you, Chief.
We can't do it before then? Why can't we do it now?
Councilmember, I think right now, if we were to move forward with that, we would have a plan that we would just come back and try to adjust in 2024's budget process. So my preference in talking with Fire Marshal Jalazda was to slow down a little bit. Obviously a lot of our focus has been on fire compensation for operations division firefighters, but slow down a little bit on the fire marshal side. And then when we come to you in 2024, in 2023 for the 24 budget process, that we come with a comprehensive plan that doesn't need to be adjusted.
And if I may, Chief, Councilmember Gregory, would you mind me?
Yeah, I was just about to say, I trust his judgment.
And I wanted to add that Amy's going to share with you after we get to the next slide or two, a comprehensive review of all pay plans within the city, not just the fire department, but police, and for really, we have a pay plan for non-sworn employees. They're getting paid, so it's a plan, but it doesn't have the steps like the other plans do. And so a very important part of our analysis will be a proposal to add a step for non-sworn employees like they've never had before, which you see on this chart right here, how after 5 years, still the non-sworn hadn't moved, still at 30, even though they're now at 17 an hour, hadn't moved from 35 to 60. So that's a step 2 of this overall proposal. Let me now go to Councilmember Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Councilmember Waring sort of jumped me a little bit, and I appreciate his bringing it up again, because he and I have had this discussion with Councilmember Gregory not too long ago. So the concern is that with the fire department recruits, it's just a different animal with any other city employee. We don't see a recruit getting paid at a certain level, and then as a result of that becoming a non-recruited to a full-fledged member of the fire department, their pay goes down. And for whatever reason, that has a negative impact on our fire department when they become sworn officers in the department. So I just want to echo what both Councilmember Waring and Councilmember Gregory have been bringing out with this issue, and Chief just reinforced the need to address this issue, and I'd like to get it resolved before this year. And also with the fire marshal to sort of re-echo what Councilmember Gregory has said. If it can wait, that's fine, but I think it's just sort of important that if we can wrap all this up one time with all these issues, I would rather have it done for fiscal year 2023 as well. But I'll defer to your recommendation, Chief. You know that I will, but if it's possible, I think getting all these matters addressed now is alleviating a lot of issues that we're not revisiting this thing back in 2024.
Okay, I'll certainly get with the fire marshal tomorrow to discuss where we are with that, and then I'll chat with Kay about the hourly rate issue also.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. Mayor.
Thank you, Chief. Councilmember Gregory.
Yeah, I just want to reemphasize what you just said earlier in terms of coming up with a comprehensive approach to classification and reclassification, classifying some of these jobs.
Right.
I totally agree with you. That's the way to go,
yes,
instead of piecemealing it. So I'm anxious to hear what Amy has to say in that regard, as well as Kay.
Okay, back to Amy.
Okay, we ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and just remember that the fire recruits will get the COLA too. They'll get the increases as much as everybody else will. So moving on. So the rankings with their proposed plan, police would still be at number 1, fire is at number 2, and the city would move, or non-sworn, I'm sorry, would move to number 3 with this proposed plan.
That's our rankings relative to other jurisdictions in the state of South Carolina.
Right, in the state of South Carolina. I want to qualify that just a little bit because we wanted to compare it to where we are with the next rank, basically, which gets confusing. So I'm sorry, but police, like I said, is number 1. Their closest competitor would be the city of Greenville, but it would take Greenville a pay increase of 19% to catch our police department. So we are the number 1 paying organization for police in the state of South Carolina. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then fire is a second paid behind the city of Greenville, and they're 7% away from being number 1. So the third highest paid is St. Andrews PSD, and they are 13% behind our average starting pay. So it would take St. Andrews PSD a 13% pay increase to catch us. So we're in pretty good shape for fire. Non-sworn ranks number 3 behind the town of Hilton Head and the city of Myrtle Beach. We're 29% away from Hilton Head and 6% from Myrtle Beach. So we would have to raise those percentages in order to catch either one of them. And the next highest is St. Andrews PSD. We're only 1% away from them. So there's a threat for non-sworn that we could slip further down in rank for sure. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. And like I said, we're 2% away from Charleston Water, 4% away from Mount Pleasant, and 5% away from North Charleston. So we're real close to the ones immediately in our area.
Oh, it's kind of a little bit of a pack when it comes to non-sworn. So, and I see Councilmember Gregory's hand up again, or did you not take it down from before? There, he took it down. All right, carry on.
And then just remember, some of those the salary comparison was done in April, so some of that data might be outdated that we're comparing to. But I do have the area around us. I have their starting pay when we get further down in the presentation. And so with that new proposed plan, this is what it looks like in terms of our aggregate salaries or earnings, and then this is the annual, so you can see how they increase over time.
And I'm sure everybody realizes with those rankings she was just speaking of, it's just based on the latest information that we have, and on any given day or month, the other jurisdictions can change their pay schedules, and so it's a continuing competitive situation. Councilmember Waring? Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Amy, could you, not now, you didn't know this question is coming, but as we rank pay, could you rank the size of the municipal budgets, for example, size of City of Charleston budget, Greenville's budget, North Charleston's, total budget?
Yep.
Same thing. Because I gotta be frank, for San Andrews PSD to be pushing a close third, their budget nowhere close to that.
So we meet again on Monday, Councilmember Waring. I can have that information for you then.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. So moving on, this is just kind of it's just a graph showing the dotted lines are where we are currently, and then the solid lines are what we're proposing. So you can see the growth there.
Okay.
And then, so if you go back, you'll see in the bar graphs and even in here how police and fire all increase, but non-sworn stays flat. You see that?
Right.
That is due to them having those pay plans that they have. So they both have automatic steps that increase their pay. And then they also have, and the graphs include those automatic steps. They also have additional opportunities for pay increases. That's called their CEP steps for educational and career enhancements. that also gives them the opportunity to increase pay. But we didn't include those in the graph because they're not guaranteed. So non-sworn does not have that. So we just get COLA and that's it every year. And so that's what we were talking about. HR has started to draft a plan for non-sworn, which will implement in 2024.
Isn't that the direction that Matt seems to be going?
Yes, sort
Okay.
of. Well,
Okay,
his is moving a little bit different, Councilmember Gregory.
okay,
Because one of the issues that we have in our non-sworn plan is that there's no, within the pay grade, there's no progression up in your pay grade. So it causes an issue because you always stay at the bottom of your pay grade. And so
Yes.
this is what will address that. It's the within a pay grade issue that we're having. Matt is more addressing helping people move up to a different pay grade.
you're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly right. Got it.
So this is where the comprehensive pay plan study in 2023 will help us finalize that pay plan, because we can have them look at actually all three of the pay plans and give us some insight on that. And it will look at each of the pay grades to ensure that we're externally competitive and then internally equitable. So we're excited to have that done. Councilmember Shane has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Shea.
So Amy,
Yes.
as you go in and looking at these non-sworn increases within the grade, are you looking at other jurisdictions like state government and federal government and how they handle these increases?
No, I don't. Kay, you want to answer that? I'm not sure, because they're kind of developing that plan.
Yeah, Councilmember Shade, no, I did not look at those organizations when looking to put something together. I kind of did a hybrid of something between a merit pay plan and what the fire and police have with their steps. What I proposed, and I have drafted a policy, and I've had our labor attorney Caroline Cleveland look at it, and you know, she of course she redlined it a little bit, but for the most part she thought it was a pretty good solid plan. But it was basically 8 steps, the first one being an auto step of 5%, and then the subsequent years it would be 3%. But for those steps you'd have to actually meet certain goals. And so the supervisors would set goals with employees, and they would have to there'd have to be a way for them to actually, you know, they'd have to have a way for them to meet those goals and to measure them. They'd have to be measurable goals. But I went back and looked, you know, we do actually have a performance appraisal system. It's out there online. It's been out there for years, and departments did used to do them, but everyone just kind of quit doing them because they weren't tied to pay. They weren't really tied to anything. But I pulled some goal setting from every department, and some of them are actually pretty good. I think our supervisors really, I mean, they understand the jobs and they can set meaningful goals for employees. And I think that helps us 2 ways. It helps the employees move through the pay band, but I think it also facilitates more conversation between the supervisor and the employee of what's expected of them, and gives them, you know, feedback. And maybe part of that conversation is even helping them grow. As you mentioned, Matt Fountain wanting to help his employees grow into a different role. I think all of that is kind of, you know, rolled into the same process. So I think it's a good plan. It was going to cost about 1.7 million for the first year. And I think we kind of decided that we probably need to maybe throw everything we have this year at trying to get our minimums up. And plus, since we are doing a comprehensive pay study, I think it'd be a good idea for them to look at it, and maybe they'll have some ideas to do it a little differently. Maybe they'll want to tweak it a little bit, but I think I do have a really good solid plan for moving forward with that, which I'm very excited about, because again, for those of you on the HR committee, our HR committee, you know that we do exit surveys, and the 2 biggest reasons people leave is pay and lack of progression for non-sworn. People want to have some way to move through their pay plans, just as fire and police do. So I think it's important. And I think that's honestly, I think that's why non-sworn, one of the big reasons why we are in the kind of the situation we're in, and fire and police are actually still doing pretty well.
I should recommend that you do look at the federal system. I know Councilman Gregory and Councilman Mitchell were in the federal system for part of their careers. I was in the Department of Justice for 10 years. And we had annual reviews. Like you pointed out, we had goals we had to make and certain criteria we had to check off. And we had increases within grade of our pay in addition to cost of living increases. And
So Councilmember Shade, I think, this comprehensive study will incorporate all of that.
yeah, and I would just recommend that if you haven't looked at the other systems, that maybe that's something to pay attention to as well. And that it'll help you, I think, and I think you answering a lot of the questions when I heard you say, hey, and it makes me feel good that you've addressing that. And I know that's sort of the problem with non-sworn, is just that they need more incentive, they need more encouragement and recognition in doing that. And I think that those systems I know work pretty well. And it's across the board, and it's a pretty fair system in how they operate.
Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Councilmember Gregory.
Yeah, I just wanted to reemphasize what Kay just mentioned and go back to what you mentioned, Mr. Mayor. I think if we do this comprehensive pay study, okay,
Right.
and we look at performance standards for each employee, okay, and based upon those standards, okay, we determine whether or not a step increase is warranted, et cetera, et cetera. But again, I think that's something why we really, really need this comprehensive pay plan study.
Absolutely.
So that we can do it. I'm just responding to Councilman Shade. I really think, Councilman Shade, this study should answer all the questions you just raised.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Amy, back to you.
Okay, so just as a comparison to our neighboring jurisdictions, North Charleston's at $16.35 for full-time and $15 for part-time. Mount Pleasant's at $17.27, but they're on a 37.5-hour work week. So that hourly is a little bit inflated because of that. So just so you know where we are with a $17 minimum, where we will be in comparison to those two neighbors of ours. So if everybody's good with the pay plan, do you have any more questions on that at all? Any more discussion? No? Okay. I will move on to the budget and how this affects the budget. So bottom line, after we discussed our discussion of revenues last week, and this is for obviously the ad hoc members, and will be good information for our HR committee members. We are at in the general fund, a $6.7 million surplus. That's with the hospitality fee transfer in that we talked about last week. And then enterprise funds, we're at an $8.9 million surplus. So a $15.7 million surplus overall. That number changed a little bit because of lease purchase that we'll talk about later. That lease purchase number wasn't in there last week when we talked about this. So we're at $50.7 million surplus overall. The proposed pay plan adjustments about $16.5 million. So that's a deficit of $833,000. Total expenditures, like I said, the lease purchase number wasn't in there when we talked about this last week. So I think it was like 17 million. So with the lease purchase debt payment included in there, it brings us down to the 15. There's about 1.9 million in mandatory life safety requests that we will also need to include. And just as a reminder, the total request from the departments, additional requests above their base budgets was 3.8 million. There's 22.1 in the general fund and almost 7 in enterprise fund. So of the requests that of the $23.8 million in requests, we were recommending 9.7 million in the general fund and 800 in enterprise funds for a total of 10.5 million. Of that amount, 2.8 could come from other funding sources like reserves and tourism funds and things like that. So the remaining amount would be 7.7 million. Then lease purchase, I'll go over that real quick. 4-year lease purchase for environmental services, fire, fleet, information technology, and stormwater. Environmental services is looking for a sweeper, 3 knuckle booms, 1 rear load garbage truck, 1 automatic side loader garbage truck. Those are the SLs. And then that's a total borrowing of 1.775 million. Fire, and this is based on their long range plan that we look at every single year. They need 1 brush truck replacement, 2 pumper replacements, an air truck replacement, and 6 light vehicle replacement. That's a total borrowing of 2.9 million. Fleet replacements are based on department's requests and fleet's replacement criteria. So will be, the request includes 3 SUVs, 4 pickup trucks, 2 vans, 1 electric vehicle, 1 skid steer, and 1 dump truck. And that's a total of $516,000. Information technology. This is their PC laptop replacement plan and the public safety MDT replacement plan. They're replacing 200 PCs and 50 laptops, 90 police MDTs, 37 fire MDTs for a total borrowing of 1.25 million. Stormwater is asking for 1 dump truck, a mid-size excavator, 1 mini excavator, 1 backhoe, 1 heavy duty tractor, 1 Vector truck, which we replace 1 of those every year, for a total borrowing of $1 million. So 3-year purchase, police was asking for 1.7. We have it in here at 1.6, just based on their their replacement plan and their needed vehicles. And so the summary is it's a almost 7.5 total borrowing for 4-year, 1.6 for 3-year. Total impact to the budget is 1.1 million for the debt payment. Any questions on that?
All right.
I'm just curious, Amy, on the debt payment, what interest rate y'all factoring in on that?
That's a good question. Andrew, can you answer that?
Sure. So we did 2.5% on the 4-year lease purchase and 2.25% on the 3-year lease purchase. We looked at historically what we would get in interest rates compared to the market. And so, for example, I think our last interest rate, let me pull up the history real quick for lease purchase. In 2021, our interest rates were 0.68% and 0.6%. This year, our interest rate was 1.4 and 1.2. So we felt comfortable with going a 2.5 and a 2.25. The last time we had an interest rate that high was back in 2019.
Yeah, you're right. Thank you. Amy, on our reserves, can we put any of our reserves in treasury bills?
No, I don't think so, Councilmember Waring, because we're dictated by the state what we can invest in.
Yeah, but I mean, but treasury bills are, kind of like issued by the federal government. Treasury bills are getting up to 4% right now.
Let me look
just wondering if we could take advantage of that.
Okay, let me look at that.
Okay, great.
We have most of ours in the South Carolina local government investment pool, which is allowed. So let me just look at that and I'll get back to you.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And then, okay, so path forward and how do we balance the budget? So going back to, if we adopted the pay plan as presented, the budget has a deficit. So we still need to go through all of the departmental requests and review the recommendations that we had. So obviously we have more work to be done. And then options to consider depending on our priorities and the additions we would like to make to the budget. these are, we could, in order to balance budget, we can increase revenues, reduce the pay plan proposal, or not fund the departmental requests recommended. So on Monday, we have a meeting about all of this, but we're just going to need to make some decisions. And I just want to give you some information about the pay plan, just in case this is one of the options that we chose to help balance the budget. A 1% total cost for the pay plan. That's the COLA for everybody, sworn and non-sworn, is 1.3 million. A 1% police cost is 368,000. 1% fire cost is 301,000, and 1% non-sworn cost is 657,000. So you'll know about roughly what 1% for each of those categories costs. Okay. So our next meeting is October 31st. We'll go through all the expenditures. I will send you the full request list with our recommendations so you can review those before Monday, and so we can look at those and get your opinions on those, and then review our revenue options and just try to balance the budget.
All right. Thank you, Amy. I see a hand up from Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amy, I'm not on either of these committees. Will you be sending that to all council members or just committee members?
So on Tuesday, the day after the ad hoc meeting, we're actually having a full council budget workshop, which I'll go through everything on Tuesday with everybody.
Okay, but can you send them now prior to the meeting?
I'm sorry, what? I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, can you send them now? I have time to look at before the meeting.
You want me to send you these slides before the meeting, or which? I'm sorry, I still couldn't hear you.
Back to the slide before. I think you said we're going to share this with committee members. Yeah, for the Monday meeting, you were going to share something with the committee members. I was just asking if you can share that to council as well.
Yeah, I guess I could do that.
You can do that. That'd be fine.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments, suggestions? Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be real brief. I just think that aspirationally, trying to put our city at the top of the list in South Carolina is a reasonable goal. When you start comparing the city of Charleston to big cities in Georgia and North Carolina, it really is apples to oranges, because they have so much more home rule authority when it comes to revenue matters. We just don't have the same kind of tools that those cities do. It's not even a matter of size. It's just a matter of, authority that's given to cities in these other states. I mean, for all intents and purposes, the city of Charleston has the same tools in the toolkit that the town of Ravenel does. I mean, it's just, there's no distinguishing between these revenue mechanisms in South Carolina when you scale up levels. And you don't see that in other states that are maybe a little bit further along from a development standpoint. So just wanted to mention that thought. And if we can get to the top of the list in South Carolina, I mean, that's literally about all we can do realistically. So thanks for everyone's help.
Thank you. That's why we thought it was fair to, include those comparisons to just South Carolina jurisdictions at this time. Thank you. Councilmember Gregg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this question is for Ms. Cross. I just have a question about the COLA plus I guess we'll call it a performance increase or annual increase. I don't see this in the private sector where you adjust based on CPI inflation. I understand the principle behind it. It just seems like that pay increases are adjusted, or pay increases are made based on what other organizations are doing in our sector. So I guess my question for you is, I mean, is this how other municipalities do payment adjustments? Is it based on COLA plus this? I think it were COLA plus 3%.
Most of the organizations I'm familiar with, Mount Pleasant, North Charleston, Charleston Water, they have merit pay systems that they sort of incorporate into a cost of living. So in other words, they'll come up with what they can afford that year. And let's say they say, okay, we have 4 to 5% to work with. So everyone does their performance appraisal. And depending on where your score falls, you might get, most employees might get, let's say 3.5%. If you're just, doing your job and you're doing okay, you might have a few people on this end who really are almost getting ready to get fired because they're just not performing at all. And then you might have a few people on the other end who are your superstars who really just go above and beyond. So they might get 0.5% or 1% more. That's how most organizations, I think, do like a true merit pay system. I think that those are okay, but I think they're, can be flawed if you don't do them right. One of the things I've always really liked about the fire and police plans is you have some auto steps built in to help, the progression, just keep you moving through the plan. But you also do have things like the CEP steps, things that you can do. You can get additional training. You get a certification, even community work and just things to make you even like just a more rounded employee. But I really like the idea of setting goals too. I think that that's important. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of different ways you can do it. I've always really liked a program that Charleston Water Systems has, and I've wanted to, ever since John left the city to go there, I've wanted to implement it, but I just haven't been successful. But they actually also, in addition to their merit plan, they do a bonus at the end of the year, and it's a departmental bonus and it's departmental goals. So every department is given goals like your body council and the mayor would come up with specific goals for each department, and every employee would work toward those 3, 4, 5 specific goals in order for everyone to get that bonus. And it's about $2,000. About $2,000 those employees get right around Christmas, which you can imagine how well that's received. But I think it's great because not only is it, a nice bonus to give your employees at the end of the year, but it forces employees to actually work together for common goals. So I think, so it's got like a teamwork aspect to it too. So, I really am a fan of that, but since we haven't even taken the first step yet, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. But my point is there's a lot of different ways you can structure these. And I think that I'm hoping that any good compensation, company who will be able to come in and they'll kind of have a really good feel for how other organizations do it. And they can look at our structure and kind of, give us some recommendations, some ideas about, what the best way to do it is. But my preference would be something closer to a step plan than an actual merit increase plan. Does that answer your question, or is that?
Yeah, I think so. I understand that we need to increase compensation. It just 12%, 13.33%. Those are big numbers. I just don't know if that's, is that what everybody's increasing pay right now?
See, we are behind.
We're catching up.
We're catching up. This is a very unusual, it definitely is much higher than what I've seen. Typically in the years I've been here, you see some years it's been 2% cost of living. Some years it's been 3, maybe 4.5. That's kind of more what you see for a COLA. We're just trying to get ourselves up to market level so we can be competitive. But yeah, on a normal year, I would expect to see something between maybe 3 and 4% cost of living increase, and then the step would be on top of that.
Okay.
Because the problem is, okay, we've got these wide pay bands, and when we get a COLA, we increase our pay band. We have a minimum, a mid, and a max, and we increase all 3 of those by whatever COLA we get. So the employees, the non-sworn employees we have, who are maybe sitting at the bottom at that minimum, we increase them, we give them an increase, but we also increase the minimum. Guess where they are now? They're still sitting at the bottom of the band. And people need to see themselves have some method of progression. And again, I think there's a lot of different ways you can do it, but I do think it's necessary. I think we really need, especially we've really found that especially, people just right out of college, younger population, they're not really satisfied with being somewhere that they can't see where they're going. Like, what's my next step? Where do I go from here? What do I have to do to move up? So I think it's a very important discussion. And so I don't know, I'm really looking forward to having the opportunity to implement something. I think it'll help keep us from getting in the situation we're in right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Shade?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. When we had our public safety meeting to address some of these concerns, looking at, I think either Chief Courier and I think it was Chief Courier in his presentation, presented us with the actual cost of living in the Charleston area based on rent. And Chief Courier, if you're still on, then you present that with us for the actual cost of living. And so the comparison may not be by city to city as to size of the city, but it may be more important for us to look at and to share, Kay or Amy, the cost of living in Charleston. And I think we saw some graphs about the average rent, the average cost of a starter home, perhaps. Chief Courier is nodding. So we saw that with the Public Safety Committee. We got that information, and maybe worthwhile to share that with the entire council to answer some of Councilmember Gregg's questions about why we're behind. I mean, there's many factors that Kay has brought out, I think, and then Amy has brought out with why we're behind, but there's also reality check. A lot of our employees don't live in the city of Charleston. It's too expensive for them to live in the city of Charleston. We are an expensive place to live, and that's not factoring into now what we're all experiencing with a across the board inflation issue that we're looking at on a national level. So these increases are necessary. If we don't follow through with what is being proposed by our staff right now, we will fall further behind. And if we don't implement some kind of pay plan that Councilmember Gregory's been talking about and Kay's been mentioning, we will fall further behind. And this is impacting every aspect of our city government. It's our services. And we have to be mindful of that whatever we do, we're impacting. So we've heard this from the Stormwater Department, from Public Services Department. Just about every department is realizing a decrease in their ability to provide services. And it's having those the adequate staff necessary to do that. So these are some real issues that we're tackling here. We've got to move forward with that, and we're going to make some tough decisions. And I have a pretty good idea where I'm heading on this when those numbers are presented to us. But Chief, if you wouldn't mind just sort of sharing that with Kay, those other numbers that we have with the actual cost of living in the Charleston area, what it really means and how far these dollars go in today's world. I think it gives you another reality check on what we're facing, what we're addressing. When I go to Kay's, used to go to Kay's breakfast meetings, those appreciation breakfast meetings, I sit among some of these city employees. I ask them, raise your hand if you live in the city of Charleston. I get 0 hands raised. I ask if you live in the county of Charleston. I get a couple of hands raised. If you live outside the Charleston County area, it's kind of stunning. That's certainly not a scientific approach to what I'm doing, but it gives me a good feel that it is expensive to live in the Charleston area. That's just reality that we're dealing with. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I just want to ditto what Councilman Shade said. I did have the privilege of sitting in on that meeting and experiencing the presentation that Chief Carr made. And it really, really is a reality check. So I agree with you, Councilman Shade. That's something that needs to be shared across the board.
Thank you. Councilmember Waring and then Parker.
I think Ms. Parker had her hand up before me.
All right, Councilmember Parker, would you like?
That's okay. I'll defer. I'm not on the committee, Councilmember.
Okay.
You go first.
All right, thanks. I'm gonna ditto that as well. As a matter of fact, certain communities like Hilton Head, they have to pay a premium to get people to come and live over there. When you look at the homes per square foot in Charleston, it ain't far from Hilton Head. Same thing with banks on Hilton Head. You know, the banks have to pay people more, the tellers, the CSR people to come and work on Hilton Head. So unfortunately, our success in the city has been to the point to where the people that literally run this city can't afford, in particular, to live on the peninsula. That said, Amy, I know I had touched bases on the possibility of trying to work into this budget a somewhat of a bonus plan. Have you had a chance to even take a look at that? Okay.
You mean for 2023, Councilmember Waring, or are we talking about something at the end of 22?
Well, maybe they get it in 23, but I guess you get qualified in 22. Yes.
Yeah, well, you know, because of the price tag of this, I hadn't really incorporated a bonus structure into that. One thing I did not mention though, we're doing the salary set or the compensation study. We will have to reserve some funding in provision for salary increase so we are able to implement whatever the recommendations are. Because one of the things we talked about is within the grades, we could have some issues still, you know, even though we're doing this really great COLA pay plan adjustment, there could be some grades that still need to be looked at and adjusted to make sure that we're competitive.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We can talk later.
No.
I guess I thought when you were talking about that, Councilmember, you meant this year in 22. So I apologize.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Parker?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you again for letting me speak on this committee. Kind of back to Councilmember Gregg's point with the percentage pay increase. I am curious because we had this conversation, I think, in Public Works, if I'm correct, Councilmember Waring. Will the pay increase is obviously going towards, you know, for all non-sworn. But I guess my question is back to the conversation that we had before, you know, I hate to point, you know, I'm just using this as an example, but the permit center, you know, and a ditch maintenance crew member are at that same pay scale, that same non-sworn pay scale with that increase?
Yes.
Yes. Or are we still and Councilmember Waring, if I'm putting you on the spot, I'm sorry, but just back to that conversation that we were having about sort of either looking at a bigger scale project or having a separate pay for some of these jobs that we have gone. I think the mayor touched on it as well. That are we going to have these sort of pay scales for these jobs that they've been vacant for, you know, X, you know, we've had a huge vacancy number in certain positions. Are we going to offer other additional pay increases, things like that?
Yeah, that was where Mr. Fountain and Ms. Cross and her team have been working together on creating getting some of the monies from positions that hadn't been filled, so we can actually start hiring some of these people at a higher rate of pay. And he came up with different job titles and something that people can be able to progress from, kind of like what Ms. Cross was talking about. I won't say merit, but basically you get a job and you know what your next progression will be. And that's being implemented. That's what we voted on last night, to be able to use some of the monies from jobs that went unfilled in the 22 budget to be reallocated towards that new system that Mr. Fountain has come up with. And the mayor also touched on in Public Works about same thing you just said, jobs that have been advertised for a year and sometimes 2 years and not being filled because frankly the compensation is too low.
So that's what Amy was referring to just a few minutes ago about having some money set aside. So as we look at those adjustments or somebody's job being reclassified to another notch, so to speak, that we'd be able to fund those next year, just as you're discussing. Is
Can
that
I,
right?
can I add to that too, Mayor?
Yeah, sure,
So
sure.
The other part to that, Councilmember Parker, is the pay is the pay, you know, for everybody, non-sworn, sworn, according to how we proposed it. And what you're talking about with public works, that's kind of looking at additional positions, it's reclassifying and changing positions and things like that. So that would possibly cause a change in pay, but it doesn't mean that certain people within the same pay grade are going to get paid differently. I just want to make sure that we understand that, because so it's just adjusting certain positions and changing things around and allowing him to reorg a little bit that will cause some of that in addition to the COLA adjustment and the pay plan adjustment. Does that make sense?
I think so, but I'll just try to say, so, okay.
I just don't want people to think that we're only going to pay stormwater people, you know what I mean, like a higher pay than everybody else in the city, because that's not what that means. It means reclassifying positions, adding new positions and things like that to reorg his whole department in order to do what he needs to do and have the right position, right rates of pay, right? That's what that is. It's not, I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Okay, so the base pay, I mean, if Matt Fountain is hiring a ditch maintenance hand tool person, their minimum pay is going, with the new pay plan would be then $16.25.
It's gonna be $17. Well, they could be above that $17, but that's also what they're talking about too, is looking at those positions and seeing if there needs to be any change in the job description. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Right.
So yeah, what's being proposed today, every single employee in the city will be impacted and have a 9% COLA and then an additional pay plan adjustment of 3 or 4.33% for a total of 12 or 13.4%. And that would apply to every single employee in the city. So that helps equalize some of what we've been talking about for the last year, but it also, we're leaving open the possibility that, and reserving some funds, although I don't know that we have an exact amount yet, be able to look at those positions that have been vacant for a year or more, 2 years. Sometimes it's just a single position. My example is an internal auditor. We hadn't been able to attract an internal auditor. And so that it's been vacant so long, you know, maybe we need to look at the grade that it's in, so to speak. And we'll still be able to make those adjustments for next year. That's what we're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, you know, I just wanted to and I know it's been addressed, but just to reemphasize something that you as well as Amy has spoken about,
right?
To respond to Councilmember Parker, the ditch digger and the person working in the permit office making the same amount. Well, once we do this classification study, okay?
Yeah.
And through classification, you then make a determination as to what the ditch digger should be making and what the permit person might be making. And that's not to say that they may not remain the same.
Right.
Okay? But again, I think that we have to do the study to make those kinds of determinations, to be able to answer some of the questions, Councilman Parker, that you're raising.
Right.
I agree.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I agree.
All right. Any other questions, comments, or suggestions? Councilmember Waring.
I know we didn't have an executive session on the agenda, but if possible, I'd like to have an executive session with just the mayor and council members to discuss something. I guess certainly Rick could be on, but if we can just have.
I may have to leave. I have a 4:30.
Well, man, I really need either that or we need to do. Well, we're in human resources. I can share with you what I want to do. It won't take that long. It'd be better 5 or 10 minutes. That's all I want to do.
Councilman Waring, would you maybe want to do that on Monday when we have our other meeting?
That'll be fine. That'll be fine. Let's do it on Monday, and I can maybe touch base with some of you all individually.
Sounds good.
All
And
right,
that
that'd be good.
be at our workshop meeting, Amy?
No, that's we have an ad hoc meeting on Monday, Mayor, and then
Oh,
we
okay.
have the full workshop on Tuesday, so sorry.
So this is Jennifer. The meeting on Monday, though, is just with the ad hoc advisory committee. It's not a joint meeting with HR. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Thank you.
All right, let's put on there. We'll have a little executive session. That'll be fine.
Okay, great.
Take care.
All
All
right.
right, take care, Councilman.
Bye.
Thank you, Councilmember Gregory. Any other questions, Councilmember Rappel? Are you just waving goodbye?
We're just saying bye to everybody.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Take care, man. Bye.
Thank you, Kay. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.